Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we're going to work on a spinning reel. It's a 30 size reel. It's the ABU Garcia Cardinal 3000 SE. It's been around a while. Customers brought it in just because he says it needs lubrication. And to kind of hear that, there's a little bit of a burring noise in there, so I'm thinking he probably is correct. And he would know better than I would in terms of the age and when the last service was. This reel was made in Korea. It's a 30 size reel. It's good for rivers, for pier casting, certainly for freshwater and the saltwater applications. It would be bays and inlets. This isn't big enough to go surf casting with, but it will handle the moderate size and smaller inshore fish that are around the North Atlantic seaboard here. This reel is an interesting reel in that it's got a case that extends through the rotor, so in order to take this apart we have to take the rotor off, and to do that I'm going to remove a couple of pieces and parts. I start with the spool and the drag knob, and I put those into a parts tray so that I don't lose them. And then the next thing I take off is the handle. And looking at the handle, if this nut is turning, it means that it's a through handle. So this screw gets removed by backing it off counterclockwise, and that'll enable you to pull the handle through on the other side, which we'll do right now. So ABU makes a nice reel. The Cardinal's been around forever. I have a Cardinal up here that's well before this. I'm looking at this right now. We got some dark oils in here. I'm wondering if that isn't just a long time since it's been serviced. Here's an example of a very old Cardinal. I actually have two of them here. I wasn't planning to show these, but these are older Cardinals, and these have stood the test of time. These have been around a long time. This is when Zebco actually made them. And then I guess, so one is by Zebco, one is by ABU. But at any rate, the Cardinal is a brand that's been around quite some time, and it stood the test of time. It's a good brand overall. So I am noticing that there is dark grease. I'm not noticing necessarily metal filings, but it is old and it has broken down. So we're going to take the rotor off so that we can get access to the gear side and do the general service on that. We've pulled the spool and drag knob. Next up, we have to pull this little ratchet here. It's a tooth ratchet. That ratchet makes noise when the spool is being dragged out, when the drag is loose and the fish are pulling that apart. And while I'm looking at it here, we got some crud in there, so I'm just going to kind of clean that off while we're at it as well. So once that is off, we have access to the spool nut. That's held in place by a retaining screw. So I'm going to go take that out. That's just a simple nut. So you're noticing I'm putting them into my parts tray, and my parts tray holds all these small pieces and parts for reinstall. It's just a good practice to go ahead and do that. We're going to take the rotor off now, and the rotor is held in place by a 10mm nut. And this one is an opposite. It's a reverse thread. So if you're normally used to turning clockwise to tighten the nut, in this case you turn clockwise to loosen the nut. And we'll pull the rotor off. That seems clean underneath there. Underneath here we have a bearing, and we have an anti-reverse bearing. Those don't need to be removed. If you did need to remove them to pull a pinion gear or that and the like, you would take these two screws out. We're simply going to come back to this in a little bit, and we will oil around the shaft there just to make sure that it's properly lubricated. So now we're going to go down and take the bump guard out. Again, that's held in place by a little screw, and that little screw is different, of course, from the other little screw. I'm just having a little trouble grabbing this. So it doesn't hurt to have a little variety of tools here. All right, there we go. So this one slips up and out, and you got to be careful when you're taking these off, because sometimes there's a little tab behind here, and you can pry it off if you're not removing it properly. So that's why I was taking a little caution there. I'm going to put this little screw back into the bump guard here, sort of for safekeeping, but I don't want to confuse it with that other little screw that we took off there. There was a hold down screw for the rotor. And now we have, as a result of taking that bump guard off, there's a fourth screw here. And I'm going to take all 4 side plate screws out, and I'm going to look at them as I take them out, because certain reel manufacturers have different screws on the side plate. So you want to make sure that all 4 of these screws are the same screw. If they're not, you want to make a note of where those screws came out of that are different. And the reason I mention that, sometimes these ones that hide behind the bump guard are shorter than the other ones that you can see. Sometimes they're a rough thread like they are here, and sometimes they're more of a machine thread. So you got to just make sure you're putting the right ones in the right holes as you go along. Now, how do you make up for that if you've missed that? If you're already taking the screws apart and you find out one's different, go to an exploded view, get a schematic of the reel, go to the exploded view and see which ones go where. Or better yet, do what I'm doing here. Take pictures of the reel as you disassemble it. It'll always show you the sequence that you took the pieces and parts out in, and it will show you where they go if you wind up with extra parts in your basket at the end. Pictures are good. Take them on a cell phone, take them on a digital camera, take a video like I'm doing here if you like, but regardless, take those pictures. Okay, so we have a very dry bearing here, which is probably what the noise was. We've got a common setup for a spinning reel, and we have a lot of dirt in it. So we're going to take the shaft off next. To do that, we go to the cross block and we pull out that little screw that holds that one in. Now that's different from those 2 other little screws in that this one's got a machine thread on it, so I don't have to be as particular in putting that into my parts basket. And while I'm at it, since I showed you that the 4 screws are the same for the side plates, I'm going to go ahead and do that too. Once I do that, I can pull the main shaft out, and again we can see there's a lot of old oils in there. So this reel hasn't been serviced in a while, and what do we say, the squeaking wheel gets the oil. This one's squeaking and it's time for it to get that oil. Alright, once I pull that shaft out, I can remove the main gear. And there's a bushing on the other side. That's what just popped out here, so we can go put that right back in. So this has got 2 ball bearings and a lot of dirt. So it's got 2 ball bearings below. I'm sorry, 2 in total. It's got 1 on the drive side, and it's got 1 up here on the main gear. So we're just going to clean this up. It's got a lot of old degraded grease. I just use a shot of WD-40. It's a penetrating oil. Any penetrating oil or general degreaser will work. I like the oil because if you leave some behind, you don't get in as much trouble as if you leave a degreaser in there. If you leave a degreaser in there and you put fresh grease in, the degreaser is going to continue to work and break down that grease that you're putting in. So just a personal preference of mine to go ahead and use that penetrating oil. And we'll clean the case up. Take a look at that pinion gear up here. Make sure that the channels are clean and that the teeth are okay, which they are. So this has just got a bunch of old grease in it. I haven't seen metal flaking or anything shimmery that would say that it's worn the gears down. This gear looks fine. We're going to go check the back of this gear. And other than it being muddied up with the old lubrication, it seems to be okay. We're going to take that old lubrication out. Make sure that that works okay. Clean off the shaft. Now we're going to check the teeth, and I'm going to use a pin here because it's all grease. I'm just going to make sure that all the channels are okay here. They seem to be. There's no teeth that are worn or chipped on this one, which is what we're looking for. If it was, it would have to be replaced. And then we're going to do the same on the back here, making sure that all the teeth that drive the crosswind gear are okay. and then there's just a little bit more of that crud on the core shaft. So that space between the two gears here is where the shaft rides, and that's why you have to take the shaft out before you try to remove the main gear, because if you're simply pulling, you're going to hit the shaft here, and that won't allow you to remove this. Alright, so I'm leaving these on the table just because as soon as I clean up the crosswind gear, which is what I'm doing right now, and the crosswind block, which is next to it, we're just going to start to reinstall here. We're going to lube it up and put it back together again. And nice reel. I am going to guess that the pricing on this reel, it's moderately priced. It's just above entry point. It's got some good components in it. The 2 ball bearings are certainly better than the 1, which is the standard entry-level reel. It looks like the materials are in good shape. It comes from a reputable manufacturer. This reel was made in Korea, so not that I really care where reels are made these days. People ask me, what do you think of the Chinese reels or the Korean reels or the American reels or whatever? And my response is kind of simple. I really don't care whose hands put them together. What I really care about is the materials that are in these reels, and if they've gone offshore for cheap labor, that's one thing. But if they're using cheap pieces, parts, and components, that's what sets the reel apart. So it's not necessarily junk because of who assembled it. It could be junk because of the pieces and componentries that were used in it. All right, so that's reset now. The crosswind gear and the crosswind block is reset. I'm going to go ahead and grab that blue grease again. The blue grease I use is a Penn Reels Precision Grease, but quite honestly, any reel manufacturer's grease is fine. It just so happens that I have the Penn grease. The word of caution there, use reel grease when you do service your reels. Don't use universal greases. Don't use automotive greases, things like that. Just go spend the extra few dollars, go get the reel grease that's appropriate for this, because these greases are engineered for fishing and water resistance and the like, and you'll be happy that you did that in the long run. Okay, so we're just putting a little bit more blue grease on the main gear now. Now we've got to reinstall the shaft. Now the shaft is offset. It has a D base to it. It's not a round shaft, so you got to sync this up with the hole in the crosswind block. That's fairly easy to do. And then you grab the machined little screw from your parts tray, and you tighten that down before you go any further. That's a little Phillips head nut, and we'll just tighten that up. Then we're going to go lube the bearing that's up top there. And again, I don't typically mess with anti-reverse bearings and springs and nonsense like that. You can see the bearing right here for the reel. I'm going to go grab some Reel X reel oil. Again, get the oils that are designed for fishing reels, whether it's the manufacturer's reel or otherwise. I'm going to put a shot on both sides so it gets the bearing. I'm just going to turn that a little bit just to make sure that it gets the lubrication worked into it. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to test this bearing first to make sure that it's functioning. You can do that by grabbing a screwdriver, flat bladed, and make sure that it turns as you're turning it, or you can turn it by your hand and feel it. And then a generous dose of oil. Since this hasn't been oiled in quite some time, you can flood a bearing. It's not going to have any effect on it. And generally speaking, I oil bearings and I lube metal parts, moving metal parts. Say that 3 times fast. And then we can go ahead and reinstall. We know that the 4 side plate screws are the same, so it doesn't matter what sequence or order you're putting them in. However, when I do this, I do like to go north, south, east, west, just to keep the proper tension onto a screw. And some folks ask me, what about a mechanical screwdriver? It speeds it up. Yeah, it does. I concern myself on reinstall with those because they have a high torque. And the high torque working on a graphite case or a plastic case can warp it, and it can cause problems with the performance of that. So I stay away from those mechanical ones. Also, I like working with my hands, which is another reason why I do it this way. However, if you don't have the hand strength, if you need the mechanical screwdrivers, I would tell you stop short of fully tightening it down when you're installing, and do the last 1 or 2 turns with your hand. And just hand tighten is all you need to do on these reels. They will hold together perfectly fine. Okay, so last one going in here now. Then we'll reinstall that bump guard, and we'll go up top, and we'll do the rotor, and then we'll come back and we'll do the drags on this. So we're doing a complete servicing on this reel, and from what you saw on the reel so far, it is a design that is used quite frequently. So whether you're working on the ABU here or you're working on another one of your reels, it's pretty much the same sequence of service that I'm doing here on any spinning reel. And if you're comfortable doing what I'm doing here, you should be able to service not only the ABUs but the comparables out there, the Penns, the Shimanos, the Shakespeares, the Zebcos, and so on. The big difference on most of these reels is parts availability. It's not the actual engineering behind them. Okay, so now we're going to put the rotor back on. And remember, this came out as a reverse threaded nut, so actually you're going to tighten this by turning counterclockwise, which is also counterintuitive if we're been schooled on righty tighty, lefty loosey. In this case, you have to go lefty to tighten it. Alright, so we're going to put that back together. It's a 10mm nut. We're just going to snug it. And we have the last of those little set screws there. That one holds the nut in. Okay, and we'll just put that set screw back in. Then we're going to lay this to the side and go do the drag service before we come back and do the handle and the final piece here. We will put that click ratchet on. And that click ratchet is held on by a little plastic washer. It just provides the tension so it doesn't move up and down. Okay, so that piece is done. We'll come back and grab the spool now. We'll do the spool service. See what we got under there for drags. And again, this service is going to be fairly consistent across spinning reels as well. The only question is what type of material is in the drags itself. They're held in by a C-clip which rides in the groove of the spool, and the spool takes a lot of abuse. It's the #1 place where water comes in, and so if you're doing one of these reels, you want to make sure that you get that water, you get the drags and the water and the like out of there. So that's why I'm pulling these out now. Okay, so we got them all out. And what we've got here is Teflon drags. So Teflon drags don't need to be oiled because they're a polymer all by themselves. So they're pretty much self-oiling. Again, common practice, not just in low-end reels, common practice. So this is the way it lays out. You have a Teflon, a metal, a Teflon and eared washer, a Teflon and the final cap washer. And the Teflons here, you can see the problem that this fellow was having. He had a lot of use on these. So we're going to do two things here. We're going to clean off the old dirt. We're going to go inside the channel in this, make sure that this channel gets cleaned. There's quite a bit of dirt in the channel. I was using a cotton swab there, and then we can reinstall. So just clean them up. If there was any serious flaws, pitting, if the drags were cracked or broken, they would have to be replaced. But in this case, this should result in smooth operation because these are cleaning up nicely. They just seem to have a lot of residual dirt on them. But you can see simply with the paper towel that they're coming clean. This is the eared washer. It belongs in the middle of that stack. One more of the Teflons. So there's three types of drags. There's a Teflon drag, there's a felt drag, and there's a composite drag like a Carbonex or an HT100. So the felt drag gets oiled, the Teflon gets nothing but cleaned, the HT100s get drag grease. So just as an aside there, when you're setting up your reels. Okay, so we have those set up. Simply going to take that clip and reseat that into the groove. And you got to watch it. This is a spring. It will shoot, especially when you got to compress it to get it back into the channels there. That spring doesn't serve any purpose other than holding the drag stack together. But when it shoots, it goes. So pay attention to where it is. Okay, put that on. Put the drag knob on. Last piece is the handle, and as you notice when I put the handle in there, I also put the handle screw right back into the handle so I don't lose that. He had this set up as a right-handed drive, so we'll put it back as a right-handed drive. Put the handle screw in, give it a turn, and see what we did here. So overall, it's a nice reel, good quality. It's been fished an awful lot. I can tell that from the work. And now with the oiling and lube, it's ready to go again. So well done. Okay, so overall, good reel for the price. Solid components. Nice offering from ABU. So if you enjoyed this, please like it. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe. And if there's any questions or comments, please post them. I do reply to all. So thank you for viewing the video. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle.